Heavy metal has always embraced darkness, rebellion, forbidden symbols, and ancient myths. But every once in a while, a song goes far beyond artistic inspiration. It reaches back into history and revives a real occult ritual. To understand how one of the heaviest and most hypnotic songs in blackened death metal was born, we shouldn't begin in a recording studio in Poland. We need to travel back more than a century, to London, 1910. There, one of history's most controversial occultists was performing a ritual that would eventually leave its mark on modern metal. His name was Aleister Crowley. Newspapers called him the wickedest man in the world. He proudly embraced the title, referring to himself as the Beast 666. But beneath the sensational headlines stood a remarkably influential esoteric thinker who founded the spiritual philosophy known as Thelema. At the center of Thelema was a radical idea. Crowley believed humanity had entered a new spiritual era called the Aeon of Horus, governed by one famous principle: do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Contrary to popular myth, Crowley wasn't simply trying to worship evil or shock society. His ambition was far greater. He attempted to unite Hermetic magic, Qabalah, Egyptian mythology, ceremonial ritual, and even Eastern mythical practices into one complete magical system. His goal was to explore hidden layers of consciousness by invoking powerful archetypal forces that, according to occult tradition, existed beyond ordinary reality. To Crowley, the physical world was only a thin veil. Behind it existed an invisible universe of spiritual intelligences, planetary forces, and symbolic energies waiting to be awakened through precise rituals, sacred names, symbols, and disciplined will. And among all these forces, one stood above the rest in raw violence and overwhelming power: the force of Mars. Not simply the planet, but the intelligence believed to rule its destructive spirit. So, who or what is Bartzabel? To answer that, we have to go back even further. Long before Crowley, Renaissance occult scholars such as Cornelius Agrippa developed detailed systems linking planets with angels, spirits, numbers, colors, metals, and divine names. These correspondences later became a cornerstone of Hermetic Qabalah. Within this tradition, Mars wasn't viewed as merely a planet. It represented an entire spiritual current associated with war, courage, blood, discipline, destruction, and purification through conflict. According to the Kabbalistic hierarchy, Mars possesses two primary aspects. The first is Graphiel, the intelligence of Mars. In Kabbalistic gematria, names are believed to carry symbolic numerical values that reflect their spiritual nature. Graphiel represents order, wisdom, and conscious direction, the higher governing intelligence behind Martian power. But every intelligence also has its raw counterpart. That counterpart is Bartzabel. With the gematria value of 32.5, the very number that later became Liber 32.5, Bartzabel represents Mars stripped of restraint, The overwhelming current of battle, wrath, relentless will, and consuming fire. Rather than a demon in the Hollywood sense, Bartzabel is better understood as the living embodiment of Martian energy itself. And this is exactly the force Crowley sought to invoke. On May 9, 1910, in London, he performed one of his most famous ceremonies, the evocation of Bartzabel, the spirit of Mars, Liber 32:5, armed with a ceremonial sword, complex Qabalistic invocations, magical symbols, and ritual fire. Crowley attempted to draw the force of Bartzabel into what ceremonial magicians call the triangle of art, a sacred space where spiritual intelligences were believed to manifest through a physical or symbolic material basis. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the ritual wasn't the ceremony itself. It was the incantation. Crowley composed an elaborate ritual invocation that called upon war deities and divine names from multiple traditions, blending figures such as Mars, Ares, Thor, Hachiman, and Mental, alongside names from Hebrew angelology and Thelemic cosmology, into a single magical formula intended to command Bartzabel into manifestation. Afterward, Crowley preserved the ritual in his magical writings. For decades, almost no one outside occult circles paid much attention to it, until nearly a century later, when an old manuscript from that very ritual found its way into the hands of one of Poland's most extreme metal bands. How did a forgotten magical text from 1910 become the foundation for one of Behemoth's darkest songs? That's where the story becomes even stranger. Before we continue, a quick favor. This is a new channel, and videos like these take a lot of research and time to create. If you're enjoying it, please like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments after the video. Now, let us continue. So, how did a ritual written in 1910 become one of Behemoth's most unforgettable songs? The answer begins with one man, Krzysztof Azarewicz. Azarewicz isn't simply a lyricist or one of Nergal's longtime collaborators. He is an accomplished occult researcher, and more importantly, the head of the Polish Lodge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the very esoteric order once led by Aleister Crowley himself. Drawing directly from Crowley's original manuscripts, Azarewicz made only minor adaptations before handing the text to Nergal. That's why the lyrics of Bartzabel don't read like ordinary poetry. They're constructed as a ceremonial invocation. In ceremonial magic, every divine name, every color, every symbol, and every sequence serves a purpose. The language isn't meant simply to sound mysterious. It's designed to direct spiritual intention. The ritual opens with the striking invocation, O purple flame, O whirling wheel of life, appear, move, rise. Within Hermetic Qabalah, purple is associated with Geburah, the Sephira of Mars on the Tree of Life, symbolizing disciplined power, judgment, sacrifice, and transformative force. The ritual then binds Bartzabel through the traditional symbols of Mars. By the spear, the sword, the spell, by the raging blood cells. The spear represents focused aggression. The sword embodies the magician's will, the central principle of Crowley's philosophy. Blood, rich in iron, reflects the ancient alchemical connection between iron and Mars. Then the ritual expands beyond a single tradition. It calls upon divine names and war deities from multiple civilizations: Greek, Roman, Hebrew, Norse, Japanese, and Egyptian, uniting them into one ceremonial formula intended to compel Bartzabel into manifestation. Finally, Bartzabel is bound in the name of Graphiel, the higher intelligence of Mars, illustrating one of ceremonial magic's core ideas. Raw force must ultimately submit to higher order. But the ritual doesn't end with lyrics. It continues through the visuals. Created by the renowned Grupa 13 studio, the music video functions less as a performance and more as a ritual theater, with nearly every frame built around deliberate esoteric symbolism. One of the first images that surprises viewers is the appearance of a whirling dervish. At first glance, it seems completely out of place, but Crowley was deeply fascinated by Sufi mysticism and believed repetitive spinning could dissolve the ordinary ego and induce altered states of consciousness. Within the video, the dervish becomes the axis mundi, the symbolic bridge between earth and heaven, preparing the ritual space before Bartzabel's arrival. Another controversial image is the presence of nude women. The role isn't erotic, it's ceremonial. Across many Western magical traditions, spirits require a symbolic material basis through which they can manifest. Here, the women serve as ritual vessels, while simultaneously embodying Babalon, the Thelematic symbol of liberation, unveiled truths, and freedom from religious shame. Standing at the center of everything is Nergal, dressed in elaborate papal vestments beneath a towering bishop's mitre. This isn't simple provocation, it's an example of sacred inversion. By wearing the symbols of ecclesiastical authority, Nergal suggests that true spiritual sovereignty belongs not to institutions, but to the individual's discovery of their own true will. The visual language reinforces the ritual through carefully controlled colors, symmetry, and cathedral-like compositions, making the video feel less like a music performance and more like a genuine ceremonial rite. Ironically, none of this was guaranteed to exist. In fact, Bartzabel almost never made it onto the album. When Nergal first introduced the song, the rest of Behemoth simply didn't understand it. Compared to the band's trademark speed, blast beats, and relentless aggression, Bartzabel felt unusually slow, repetitive, and hypnotic. Some members weren't even convinced it belonged on the record. Even after entering the studio, the composition remained unfinished. It lasted barely 3 minutes. It had no completed lyrics, and nobody knew exactly what it was supposed to become, except Nergal. He later described the central rhythm as something almost alive, an idea that refused to leave his mind until it evolved into the 5-minute ritual heard on I Loved You at Your Darkest. Musically, Bartzabel became one of Behemoth's boldest departures. Instead of relentless blast beats, drummer Inferno built the song around slow, thunderous tom patterns reminiscent of ancient war drums. The guitars abandoned technical excess in favor of crushing, hypnotic repetition, drawing inspiration from Gothic rock and artists such as Glenn Danzig. But perhaps the song's greatest achievement lies in its vocal architecture. Nergal's deep growls intertwine with cathedral-like choirs and children's voices. The result is profoundly unsettling. It sounds like a sacred Catholic hymn, yet its words invoke the spirit of Mars. That contradiction sits at the very heart of Behemoth's artistic identity. Inspired in part by the conceptual approach of the Slovenian collective Liber, the band treats its work as more than music, combining sound, imagery, and symbolism into a single artistic statement that extends beyond the album itself. Unsurprisingly, this vision repeatedly brought Nergal into conflict with Poland's deeply influential Catholic establishment. He has faced multiple court cases, accusations of blasphemy, and repeated attempts at censorship. Yet his response has remained remarkably consistent. I'm a fighter and an anarchist. Every attempt to censor me only fuels my art. And perhaps that's the true legacy of Bartzabel. It's far more than another extreme metal song. It's the meeting point of a century-old magical manuscript, ceremonial philosophy, ancient mythology, visual symbolism, and modern heavy music. The ritual ended long ago. The purple flames faded, but the echo of Bartzabel continues to resonate, one of the most extraordinary intersections between occult history and metal ever committed to record.